Recording.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Name Pending Podcast. I am, of course, your host, Ruben Vargas, and today I'm with Steve the Philosophist and Isaac. Um, I
Don't
hate to
you
say,
dare add a title to me. I will not accept it. I will only accept the Actually, speaking on titles, I do have one. A friend bought me a barony in a place called Sealand. You may have heard of it. Either way, moving on.
all right,
Isaac V is not a robot.
there we go.
Wow.
David, unfortunately, could not make it on today, but but he is missed today. He is missed for today's episode. Now, we have a lot to cover, everyone. Boy, whoever made up it's been wild. June has been
Uh,
off the walls.
oh
Crazy.
boy, I miss 2020 already.
Oh my God. Let's not. But I think where we want to start off is Independence Day is going to be this upcoming Sunday, and I think this is a good place as any to jump off and kind of discuss what is Independence Day worth celebrating? Is the country that we live in, the United States of America, is there anything worth celebrating in this country? I'm of the opinion, as someone who's always been fascinated with history ever since I was a little kid, and as someone who is also first generation Mexican American, I've become very acutely aware that this country has done terrible things and persists in doing terrible things here and abroad.
Hmm.
And also, anything that you could point towards as being, as what other people might say is unequivocally good, is still tainted. Like, I think a really good example is NASA. I mean, a person, an ordinary American, or might say, well, hey, we made it to the moon. Look at all these advances in science and technology and in the advances in humanity and exploration that NASA made. Well, one, that all was just one big match between us and the Soviets to see in this ongoing struggle of supremacy across the world, first off. And second off, it was all enabled by recruiting Nazi scientists. Look up Operation Paperclip, everyone.
So, to your point, like when Donald Trump made his whole "Make America Great Again" campaign, um, I feel like there's a huge missed opportunity out there in the ether because the first thought that came to my mind, knowing a lot of these histories, is make America great for once. Like,
When was it
like
great?
we have lots of these corrupt, tainted things that just go on through all parts of our history, and there's no excuse to why we can't at least have one era of American history where our government's not corrupt, where we don't have a gilded society going on in some way or form. At least that's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I once again, when was this country great? I I feel as if maybe this idea of the United States as we know it may never have. m- I think that the idea that we're now building towards is something we've concocted, sort of in this sort of in the growing up with this image of what the United States might have been, and now we actually have the potential to turn it into something that might actually resemble what we put on paper. So I mean, like, celebrate America, yes, but I don't celebrate what we've done because a lot of it is pretty downright awful. A
Yeah.
lot of things that have been perpetrated underneath the flag of this republic. But I do see that at least now we have the potential to maybe make it something that might be inspiring. And in that sense, I don't want to denigrate it. I don't want to bring it down. But I do want to say, hey, we can actually make this the revolutionary beacon that we were taught that it probably was, that maybe this can be the land of the free and the home and whatever. It might be able to put our money where our mouth is for the first time in history. And I think to myself, wow, maybe I might, maybe then after we achieve that, maybe after we've, done away with the many injustices within our own country and maybe start acting with some decency and some humanity and some compassion abroad. Yes, maybe then we can, look up at the flag and say, oh my God, what a wonderful thing it is to be an American. But until then, I don't know. I'll still have doubts till then. Forgive me for my rant, but
It's all good. So I just want to clarify that, I mean, at the same time as having all of these criticisms, for me personally, I think there is something to celebrate with 4th of July. I don't know if maybe it should be better off as because its history is simply establishing our independence, it becomes a one-off holiday instead of the more popular another excuse to drink in, this time with fireworks,
at least we got it right, unlike Cinco de Mayo,
yeah. Because I think the American Revolution had all sorts of good points and good reasons for happening. It just only was there to favor white men with property. So if we could, take all the good ideas from that and move forward, like you were describing, Isaac, I think that then at least if we're doing the right things, and I feel like in terms of corruption, it's like society's been advancing, technology's been advancing, but the corruption seems to be getting worse, in my view.
Here's my hot take. Yeah, I don't, my apologies, but maybe it's just always been this corrupt. Maybe it's just like, it's always been that like corrupt. I mean, by God, like some freaking rural counties are run as like, personal, like feudal domains, where you'll have one family who's just sort of like the rich family that everybody looks up to. So, I mean, when I think of corruption, I say to myself, well, it's always sort of been there. It's just been dressed up differently.
To that point, Isaac, I think and this is a point that I like to make over and over again. When we see on the news about, say, police brutality against black and brown folks, or Native Americans, and this ongoing discussion of the Washington football team and its racist name that they just recently got rid of. Or they're now known as the Washington football team, and they'll be voting on a new name.
The Washington football team.
The Washington name pendings.
We are oh my God, our brand is spreading.
Now, real quick. Vegas has the Washington Lincolns leading as a presumptive name that they're going to choose, because out of all the presidents, Lincoln seems to be the least controversial and the most heroic.
But he suspended habeas corpus, okay?
Yeah, that too. But I mean, the point is, when people kind of question this kind of stuff, and I like to point out, it's always been there, but we have ways of being more aware of it. The internet has made it to where we're always aware, we're always plugged in.
We have it's like that sort of Christian trap where it's like you got to spread the word to everybody, because then they'll have to make the moral choice of becoming a Christian or going down to hell. Now it's sort of like, well, now you know what's going on, so you've got to make that moral decision. Thanks, liberals.
So I concede to both of your points. I think it really is more a factor now. In retrospect, it seems more a factor that things are more overtly corrupt, in that where if you caught video footage of someone trying to rig an American ballot box during election, or if you even had anyone do a story on this idea that coin tosses decide districts in some states, you would have had a freaking heyday and uproar from a lot of people, or like you would have expected to, at least, right?
A coin toss. Oh my God.
But here today, it's like there's a silent, okay, yeah, that's what happens. What the fuck are you going to do about it? Coming from the elites. That's
the other side of the coin. We're more aware of this kind of stuff happening, but on the other side, we're kind of becoming inured to it, because it's like turning on the water hose. You know what I mean? At a certain point, you're just gonna get used to all that cold water, basically.
Sorry.
Makes sense.
Go ahead, Isaac.
I was just gonna say, I think I disagree in the sense that I feel that in the past, people just sort of accepted that, yeah, okay, freaking the McCluskeys run this county. But like nowadays, when we see blatant corruption, we freaking people cancel them. People put like the spotlight on them. There is recourse, at
That's
least in the
true.
court of public opinion, which never existed back in the days. I mean, you just they'd own the newspaper and they'd say, oh no, these darn filthy communists, crack their heads in, and that would be it. You wouldn't know any better. But like now, you can
Now
go
we have
after
Joe
those
Rogan.
folks. Yes, you've got
Oh.
freaking Joe Rogan. Honestly, he is redefining journalism. I think that in the end, it's just going to be this roided up freaking boy who's going to be the arbiter of what is good and what is not. I'm ready for this brave new world.
Joe Rogan's head is a sponge. And I mean that because you feed him anything and he just absorbs it. And it seems like the next episode he's wrung it out. And you feed him more information and he's like, oh, dude, that's sick,
I don't know if you were aware of this, and I don't mean to check you when it comes. I don't want to make you look, anything, but they actually signed a deal with SpaceX. They're going to put his head into orbit. It's actually an artificial satellite still on the ground waiting to be launched.
Oh,
boy.
Such fun times.
Ugh.
His head in a jar. So.
No, they're just gonna launch it up. He's the launch vehicle. He's just gonna freaking taekwondo kick himself up there. Lord have mercy.
Now, getting back to is anything worth celebrating? I can only think off the top of my head one legitimately great thing that this country has done, and that is the efforts of Jonas Salk in developing the polio vaccine. And here in the country, polio has been completely eradicated, and across the world as well. You really don't hear about polio outbreaks. Like we live in a world to where you don't expect to catch the disease that's going to make you disabled for the rest of your life. That was the dedication of this not just this one man but the people around him. But he took the point basically on this whole thing. And when he was asked why didn't he patent the vaccine, he said, would you patent the sun? And as far as I'm concerned, he's a legitimate American hero. But that's far and few between when I think of a legitimate American hero, because everything else down the line, like another thing that I think was a unequivocally good thing that happened through the worst possible way was, if it's one thing that I'll give Ronald Reagan credit, and it's the only one thing, it's the amnesty he gave to Mexican migrants, because through that, I don't think my parents would have been able to obtain naturalization.
Well, I mean, I agree with you still on those points, because I mean, my family got in as political refugees fleeing the Iranian Revolution. So I mean, hostile U.S. government helps my family. I'm happy on that point. But I would not want to insult the memory of Mr. Salk by giving his moral sort of triumph there to the United States as a whole. I think he was a genuinely moral man who went ahead and did it. But will I give the United States credit for Mr. Salk doing the right thing? I don't know. I would give America credit, perhaps, for playing a strong role in the destruction of European fascism. I mean, that's a plus. We'll give him a plus for that.
Well, it's still a work in progress.
Still a work in well, okay. They did it once and they thought it was over, and now they're like, oh my god, are they still a thing? I don't know.
I want to make a hot take about that whole thing. I've been seeing on Twitter over and over again this opinion of who really won the war. Was it us or the Russians? And I want to point out it was a collaborative effort, okay? And I mean that in the truest sense, because if the Russians did their part, and it's not like we didn't do our part, but if you get into those games of who did more of a part, it's like, dude, there's no more. The Third Reich is over. Let's not fight over who did their part.
Let's be happy we won. How about that?
Exactly.
That's great.
So there's plenty of things that, like, I will say are things I dislike about American culture as a whole, and American history certainly plays its role in how those cultural details came about. It's not to say that I hate every American. No, I mean, it's also not to say that I have no pride for my people, that I grew up with and my surroundings. It's more to say, well, look, there's some problems, some
Mhm.
battles of ideas that shouldn't have won, like ideas that shouldn't have won the battle, and
Yeah.
they're still here and they're still in place.
Pride
Now
is
that being
pride is not an
said,
obligation, of course. Yeah.
you take another country, which in another culture which I admire personally, Japan. They got their issues, they got their problems, they have corruption, much like the US today. um but you take their history and you look at the things that they are proud of, and it's like the shinsengumi, the samurai, the ninja. You have, all of these badass histories of battle and war and strategy and philosophy that all tie together into their what is basically, things to be proud of regarding their heritage and culture that they are from. um
Uh,
as it's another culture beyond my admiration for, they do plots that we don't do here in the West, for anime and their storytelling that I just love. Beyond
oh
that,
yeah.
I don't negatively judge them. I don't feel like I can say anything inherently bad with the way things are culturally for Japan, because I didn't grow up there. I grew up
Mhm.
here. And here, one of the things I really hate is, so like I wouldn't say for Japan that profanity it should go one way or another, but I do feel personally that in America, profanity is a topic of manipulation and abuse, not using profanity, but shaming people for profanity. Like these are parts of the English language, and you look at countries like Japan, for example. Profanity is not really like, there's things you can do that are dishonorable and considered rude, but the use of particular words is not quite the thing. It's more like actions or
Mhm.
Different cultural
formality,
mores. Yeah.
right? But I would think if I were Japanese and I grew up in a society where I was expected to be formal towards my elders, and they used my momentary attempt to be personal and not formal with them, as an excuse to manipulate and abuse me mentally or psychologically, then I would hate that too. So then that's what I feel happens with profanity in the US. Sorry for that long ass tangent, but the point being, um the I think with American culture, similar to the heritage of the Shinsengumi and ninja and samurai history, within Japan, in the US we have a similar bit of
The
some
cowboy.
aspects. Yeah, the western, the frontier, the wilderness that is the North American continent, and trying to build a society from there that is still fairly recent. And we just, there's so much strength and power, I think, that was naturally selected, both culturally, even more so than genetically, naturally selected into our culture, as mimetically selected,
Mhm.
um
Mm.
into aspects of our culture, which make us, on one extreme, yeah, we're full of fucking narcissists.
Yeah.
We had a narcissist for president, and we're full of fucking psychopaths, which is like every other president before him. um but at the same time, when you're in a lawless frontier that's trying to expand and colonize, those traits can be beneficial. So like, while it just makes somebody an asshole today, the same traits of psychopathy and narcissism might have been the only thing that actually held some small towns and small groups of people together in the long run. And so I kind of think more in line of that, the cowboy, but not even just the cowboy, the frontiersman in general,
Mm.
the people trying to expand and evolve and bring, the industrial revolution to the US. I pride my American history in that regard,
Mm.
even
You
if
know,
some stupid shitty things were done along the way to achieve it.
what's scary, man?
Hmm.
I actually sort of I really dig your comparison to Japan, because I think they're very similar. They're very very different, but at the same time very similar to us in a way. Like us though, they have a very hard time confronting their history in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
which is some, I think, sort of relates to sort of the problems that we both have in common. I mean, we have these wonderful figures of the past that we can look to, and we can sort of, try and inspire us, and maybe, try and find some pride with them. I mean, cowboys, that settlers. Well, the cowboys were mostly freaking, thieves and outcasts who ran around, shooting each other, and the settlers perpetrated genocide. And you have in terms of Japanese, Japan, you have the samurai. Yeah, these noble, these are freaking crazy warlike aristocrats going on cutting people's heads off in the Shinsengumi.
The shogunate.
The police for a hereditary military dictator in Japan. Looking at our history is a hard and difficult thing.
It is.
And finding those things that we can actually be, prideful of, it's so unbelievably difficult. We have to sort of put it in the context of what it is, but whether or not we're going to keep it as part of our identity, we might just have to pick and choose.
Yeah.
I mean, perhaps it might be a good time to set aside the whole, cowboys and Indians thing, because of the whole the stank of genocide. And maybe it might be good for the Japanese to put away the whole warrior spirit thing, because they went across most of Asia murdering and killing because of it. It's a sad thing sometimes, but we got to look at ourselves in the mirror and be like, well, this is what we are, what we have been, but it is a good thing.
And Steve, to the point, I bristle at the thought of, I don't know if I'm using this phrase right, but I bristle at the thought of moral relativism. The idea that so I'm completely aware that what we might consider not even morally or ethically right or wrong, it's more of a sense of polite and impolite, basically. That's where I like, hey, this is how you guys, this is how your society functions, this is how my society functions. That's a matter of politeness, basically, of courtesy, basically. But where I'll stand up and say, hey, no, that's wrong, is shit. Like, for instance, the two of you were discussing Japan. I know that Japan has one of the is one of the countries where it's the most difficult to emigrate into, and as we speak, they are also one of probably the most rapidly aging populations in the country.
Ask a Hafu how they feel in Japan, and you'll be very shocked. Yeah,
right. And it's one of those things to where if the nation of Japan were serious about relieving this whole thing, they could easily open up immigration to their neighbors in the Pacific Ocean, say, hey, come on in, naturalize, become a part of our society, and contribute to our social net. But there's that sort of hierarchy that they have, and that pride that we're better than everybody else around us, that's led to a whole bunch of nasty stuff in the past before, basically the genocide, the imperialism, and the invasion. So I think I'll stand up and I'll say, no, that's bullshit, basically. But on other things like what's considered polite and what's not considered polite, it's like, hey, I'll observe, I'll take my shoes off before I step in. I'll cover my cough, just be polite.
Yeah. No, and that's what I was getting at. It's more like, if the custom is this is respectful and polite, then I'm gonna follow that line. But when people come to the U.S. and they try to learn like American customs, I'll if I'm speaking with a foreigner and they're asking me questions about what's the culture, right? I'll tell them, all right, well, there's a lot of people like myself who shamelessly use profanity, and it's okay, and it's really fucking stupid to tell us not to. But and you also get into where people contradict themselves incessantly when they make these rules about profanity. They're the ones that use profanity when it's convenient.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Exactly. So, but that being said, profanity as a argument, like etiquette in general, as an ethical argument. So you're talking moral relativism. I'm not talking about that. Etiquette itself is an aspect of ethics, and moral relativism, if anything, is just screaming in light of like what's considered ethical by etiquette standards.
Right.
ultimately, I just see it as it's a communication problem. How do I communicate that I treat you as an equal, right?
Mm.
Whatever that means is, I'll do it for any society, and I'll learn about other cultures when I go to them and try to be the most conveying of what I think is their cultural norms when I'm there.
Rails.
But in the US, I'm going to be flat honest and say you should probably avoid using profanity in a business, or with somebody who you might have some conflicts with, because they could take it the wrong way just because you used it in their presence. But at the same time, when you're with cool people like me, fucking don't worry about it.
Okay. A good discussion had around everyone. I personally won't be celebrating Independence Day. If y'all out there choose to, hey, you know what? Have fun, put some dogs on the grill, watch the fireworks. Please don't set off any fireworks. We're in the middle of a drought, y'all. And of course, like, hey, enjoy the day off. If you out there have the day off like I do, enjoy it at the very least.
Why are the liberals always against fun? Let's just have some fireworks, man. Come on.
Yeah, I'm going to be celebrating it, but that's because I'm going to celebrate every excuse to drink. So,
Hell yeah.
And that
Okay.
is what America is really about in the end.
yeah,
Heck yes.
Alcoholism.
Let's make an excuse to drink. That's the American way. Okay. So moving on to our next topic. Say everyone, we're not the only country that's having an identity crisis. Our neighbors to the north are having a massive, and I probably shouldn't have taken that tone, but Jesus Christ, what's been going up in Canada is, let me put it this way. Let me walk this back. As a millennial, fellow millennials in this group, my life experience has been growing up in the middle of the bush. The bush years were rough as fuck. And I became more and more aware that, the world hates us, thinks that we're, intolerable people. And we kind of reconciled that, yeah, we're brutes, we're ugly, basically. And us in the world kind of looked up and saw at Canada, and it's like, hey, they look so much better in comparison. They're so polite, they're so nice, they have free healthcare. But as the years went on, I kind of came to that realization that Canada is like the younger brother who gets away with shit because the big brother gets all the attention. And no more has that been proven right than with uh, the recent horrific unearthings of mass graves in Canada. At the beginning of last month, as far as June, I'm looking this up on CNN. Um, there have been multiple mass graves unearthed in what they call residential schools. The vast majority of these schools were hosted by the Catholic Church, and what we did to our native populations here down in America, they did the exact same thing up in Canada. And by discovering these mass graves of what they call themselves up there, the First Nations people, a lot of Canadians up there are having a moment of identity crisis. July 1st was Canada Day. Cities and communities across the country decided not to hold their regular celebrations and instead decided to have moments of reflection in light of the horrific discoveries. And on top of that, Catholic churches have been burning left and right. At least four. As of June 29th, at least four Catholic churches have been set on fire, and statues of Queen Elizabeth have been toppled. They're going nuts up there. And
Oh dear.
now, I want to be clear about something.
it's their own George Floyd.
It is. And I want to be clear about something. As far as institutions that I would say that they had it coming, the British Empire and the Catholic Church, like, they had it fucking coming as far as I'm concerned. So
Heaven help us.
yeah.
The
So
movie, like, perfect example, but go ahead.
I've never seen that movie. Is it any
Oh,
good?
it's a classic comedy. You got to see it.
Okay, well, I'll put that on the. I'll look that up later. But as far as I'm concerned, these statues being toppled over and these Catholic churches being burned down. Well, we know about the Catholic Church, especially in the last 20 years. It's like, yeah, you guys had it coming.
They've
And
always been a problematic institution, haven't
oh yeah,
they?
yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, what are our what are our thoughts on this whole thing going up here in Canada? Like, um, what's your guys' thoughts, basically?
The Imperial legacy had to catch up with you sometime, huh?
Yeah. Well, so here's the funny thing about it, right? Like you have like me, I am very, very much a hybrid mixed human being. Uh I have uh I have roots in mostly Irish, but there's also Hispanic, Mexican, Hispanic, left over from the Mexican War, um, and Filipino, um, and I believe there's roots in Chinese, as well as Native American Cherokee. So I have all of this family history that I've known about my whole life of being a mixed individual, but coming off mostly white and passably white. Um, when issues of how we as a nation have mistreated Native Americans, or the U.S. has mistreated Native Americans, um, well, of course, there's a sort of sense, like, I'm not really conflicted. Like, I know the US was the bad guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
But here we are now, there's a whole nation of states that rules as a result of that. I could be vengeful for my ancestors on the one hand and be ashamed of my ancestors at the same time. But then the question is, like, okay, where do we go from here? It's kind of like, it's not even a statute of limitations if everybody who suffered from it is and could be held accountable is dead now. Right.
I mean, like, what can be achieved by going over and opening old wounds at this point when all the the people are out of the school system.
Right. On the other hand, though, I would argue that these things still haven't been reconciled. Like these, I think at this point, what we can say about these residential schools, that a lot of these First Nation tribes, they want restitution, they want reparations, they want a reckoning they want an official reckoning from the government of Canada. And I do want to point out that they are currently led by Justin Thoreau, right? Not Thoreau, Justin
Trudeau, yeah.
Trudeau. Close enough. Justin Trudeau, a man who, if you looked up neoliberal in the dictionary, his face would be right
He's
there.
like a second Barack Obama. I love it. He's a second coming.
Even in blackface, right?
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. Just this giant appropriating, like, I feel your pain, but I'm going to sell. We're gonna dig and sell trillions of barrels of oil and sell weapons to the Middle East. And
morals are a luxury I don't have.
Yeah.
Exactly. Just the. Go ahead, Steve.
So therein lies my point, is you have so many more present day corrupt issues. And while I appreciate the arguments for reparations and think that something of a sort should be done, where we're at in our situation of corruption and oppression, I would prioritize stuff that doesn't even have to selectively go, okay, this is going to benefit this group, and then this is going to benefit that just divides us more when we're in a desperate situation, or there's enough of us in very desperate situations to keep polarizing and dividing us. So my thinking is, and I totally respect anyone that disagrees with me on this. This isn't like I'm not 100% confident, or even I'd say 75% confident, like just barely, in this position, but I'd say let's focus on social programs that help everyone first. And then when we get to a point of stability, then we can start going, okay, here is a huge amount of wealth that was benefited to these individuals, gifted to them by their birth. And it just so happens it's got its roots in taking from everybody else, or taking from murdering people, or slavery. And then you can go and say, okay, let's actually track the record and go, you don't need all that wealth, homeboy. Like at
Yeah.
least give a nice gift to these people who still suffer from the repercussions of your ancestors.
You know what?
Go ahead, Isaac.
Oh no. So go on ahead.
Well, there's this theory that I've discussed in, DSA meetings. I'm an active member with Inland Empire DSA, and there's this chapter within the DSA called Bread and Roses. And it's this idea that if you want to bring people in the fold, the most effective way is to address their practical needs first, and then opening them up to the possibility of other issues, basically. That, you can try and appeal to one person on social justice issues like the plight of First Nations people or Native Americans here in America, and they might be sympathetic and they might agree that yes, there does deserve to be some kind of reckoning or reparations, but at the same time, it's like, dude, I have to put food on my table. I have to pay rent or something like that. So in that sense, I do agree that you want to approach with these universal programs like universal health care, um, universal health care and end student debt, but you want to come into it and let them know, hey, we're going to provide X and Y, but we also, once that has been achieved, hopefully we can address these other social justice issues or do that in tandem, basically. Because the last thing you want to do with somebody who's skeptical is kind of make it look like you're fooling them, offering them bread and then hiding the roses behind your back.
Right.
And I certainly agree that there needs to be this discussion on universal, on prioritizing what will do the most good for everybody. At the same time, though, as I do have a massive amount of empathy for what these individuals are going through, because God knows what, for instance, not my grandpa, but his father before him was a member of the Braceros, the itinerant laborers that were brought here to America during the Second World War to work the fields that the men couldn't work because they were all drafted fighting the good fight. And there's this ongoing, it's still going today, that there's this ongoing struggle to for reparations for what's duly theirs from their descendants, basically. And in my mind, it's like, yeah, I feel that I'm entitled to a piece of that pie, and that can also go into the larger discussion here in America about how a lot of African American communities are like reparations for slavery. It's like, well, if we're going to open that door for African American communities, well, you might as well open the door for Native American communities, for Latino communities as well, because we've all been victimized in one way or the other, basically. I view it as that if, for to keep on topic, if Canada is willing to have this reckoning and have reparations for the First Nations people, you best believe that they're going to have to open the door wide, and other victimized groups are going to be like, hey, you know,
Mm.
we have an issue too. Let's get our reconciliation, our reparations as well. Somebody's got to open that door, basically, and it might as well be up there with the First Nations people, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I I think that there is no such thing as an issue that can wait until after the revolution.
Okay.
Like these matters um might not necessarily be the prevailing economic concerns of me, white freaking working class from California,
Hmm.
but they are pertinent to the First Nations peoples.
They are.
I mean, this you don't get them in by saying, "Hey, after we gain political power, we'll see to it that the land question is dealt with." For that is the prevailing economic question for them, the land issue,
Oh,
and that
yes.
needs to be dealt with.
Yeah,
Like,
and I want
we
to make
can't-
it clear. I want to make it clear to everybody when I say bread
Sure.
and roses, or the idea of practical issues and social justice. I fully believe that we can chew gum and walk at the same time. Both these things can be
Mm.
addressed. I'm not
Oh, of
putting.
course.
I'm not
Yeah.
putting. I'm not saying that one is greater than the other, but I. But there's that discussion to be had, basically, and in my mind, like, you're going to open up the door for, if, like I said earlier, if Canada's going to open up the door for the First Nations people to get their reconciliation and their reparations, that's going to open the door for other marginalized groups to follow, because God knows they've got skeletons in their closet.
Yeah.
Now material reparations is a very interesting issue, by the way, and
Yes.
and me as an African American person, I don't. When it comes to black reparations for slavery, I have a very different feeling than say, well, I mean, you've signed a treaty with, you know, these Native Americans. This is their land. Why do you still occupy it? I mean, it entirely different. You know, one must deal with the situation differently. But I feel as if when it comes to approaching, you know, First Nations communities, first of all, you signed arrangements with these people, might as well keep to them. You can't keep breaking those treaties.
Mhm.
And on top of that, there are outstanding territorial and economic issues and questions of autonomy that need to be dealt with. Like, you were kind enough to give the Inuits a province and self-government, like up in Canada. Like they've got a province called Nunavut, and they run that province along the lines that the native inhabitants from majority, you know, First Nations, how they would like to run this place. You should maybe, you know, put these sorts of arrangements on a fast track and allow these people to determine their own destinies. If you're going to be behind self-determination when it comes to all sorts of other places on the other end of the world, you know, might as well keep to it in your backyard.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, so I just want to clarify, my position's very much where Ruben was coming from, where my thinking is just, if you raise the economic floor, like if you raise the floor of like the shittiest state of oppressive and marginalized lifestyle, if you raise the floor in the nation to a reasonable means that everybody can just be generally happy with and satisfied with, to tolerate, then you're gonna help the vast majority of people who have been wronged, you know, mistreated, oppressed historically. And so it's a very much a catch-all to just do that. But then when you get to the point where, okay, everybody's life is happy, tolerable, then yeah, let's go to the courts and argue historically who's benefited off of another person's family wrongfully and move some money around.
That's the struggle, I think. And somebody who identifies as socialist, that's the struggle that I have internally. Like, you know, I want to do the most amount of good for everybody involved, but I also want to be thoughtful of the needs of, say, the individual, or of the specific group that probably has good reason to take umbrage, basically, or to have a grievance. And, you know, it's a balancing act. It's a balancing act, and I think that we're going to have to come together at a certain. Well, I should walk that back. I think that, you know, as as socialism, as beyond socialism, but communalism, as cooperation, as, you know, as more and more Americans, and, you know, when I also involve Canadians up there too, as more and more people across the world kind of come to this realization that we can do a lot more together as a group, as a community, than as opposed to individuals. You know, in that spirit of solidarity, we're going to have to reckon with those issues. And
Yeah.
I certainly hope that we can come to it in the spirit of mutual understanding, of thoughtfulness, and of compassion too. And I think Canada is having that identity crisis as we speak. And what's to come of this is, who knows. I would certainly think that the not the Thoreau administration, but what was his name again,
Trudeau.
guys? That
Trudeau,
the
yeah.
Trudeau administration will have to address this in some way, and I think that they are going to do so at their own peril, because I think that at this point they know the cat's out of the bag, and if they screw this up, oh, it's going to be, they're going to nail their head. They're going to nail his head to the wall. That's how I see it.
They can't keep ignoring the issue really any longer at this point. I mean, they're going to have to at least talk about it, and frankly speaking, you know, about time. But social and political equity, that has to be achieved like hand in hand. Like
Mhm.
you Black lives, need to stop dying in the city. What is it called? It's in the streets. Like young Black youths need to stop being shot, and we've got to have a living wage.
Yep.
It's not either or. We don't achieve, like, what is it called? It's a higher standard of living, and then we can adjust our social conditions. I mean, I think we can do both.
I'm a firm believer in that as
We
well.
said earlier, didn't we?
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Steve, to your point, I think it takes all kinds. Like, I know that you, Steve, are coming. I know that you're coming from a place where you do want to do the most good for everyone. And I think, when the revolution comes, we'll have you on practical needs, and Isaac and I are going to try and fit these specific needs, and we'll just try and work in tandem, basically.
I know when the revolution comes, we're going to shoot you, and then it's going to be me in power.
I mean, do you understand part of my strategy, like why I argue that is in that you're going to have less resistance, especially with the group mentality that's inherent because it's groups that were oppressed. So you're gonna have, like, basically poor white family, working class white families in podunk towns are gonna object and argue and vote against any measure that's not going to include them and their needs,
right?
Because that's exactly what the conservative media will put out there, and even liberal media. They'll all of them will do something to piss them off.
Of course.
In light of just a reparation thing, and the
you.
real anger they have is genuine because they're podunk. They're living in these
really
garbage communities. That sucks.
Well, it's not either or.
Exactly.
I mean, they're part of our class just as much as First Nations peoples, as freaking African Americans, urban and rural. I mean, they're all part of our class. Their interests ought to, if they aren't already, but they are our interests. Like we need to pursue them just as much as any other thing. But the fact of the matter is that when minority issues are overlooked, parts of your coalition break off, they'll go off and do their own thing, and you don't achieve power. Now, I understand what you're saying, Steve, is that, up until, and it's based, I assume, on an analysis that up until now, a lot of the American left have been just ignoring working class issues and just going on, ignoring their economic issues and just fighting on moral battles. And I'm thinking, well, why not? Attack those issues too, yes, but remember the political issues.
Steve, I was reminded back in the halcyon days of the primaries of the 2020 primaries back in the before times, before the pandemic and all that, when all the Democratic candidates were interviewed by the New York Times. Bernie Sanders had this interesting answer when he was asked on the position between on his position of why is he so kind of squishy on reparations, and he stated this. He said, if the people of Germany during the 30s, Germany during the 30s was a time where it was of deep poverty and deep suffering for the vast majority of German people that you couldn't afford for your own basic needs. And if the government would have stepped in and provide for their needs, they probably would have been less susceptible to what became the Third Reich and Nazism. And I certainly do agree in that sense. Hey, bread and roses. Make sure everybody's being fed, and then try to draw them in with the idea of, hey, now that we're fed, let's address these specific issues. That is appealing. At the same time, you kind of want to be mindful that not everybody has been fed enough, or some people are starving more than others. Some people have specific needs. Just because just because everybody might be suffering from COVID, but this guy might have cancer on top of COVID.
Well, not all these issues are inherently economic.
That's why you would go for, in my strategy, the floor being raised, because it's like, if you do a homelessness program, right? And if you're trying to dole out, okay, let's help the Black homeless first, let's help the Native American homeless first, then you're going to have a much less successful program both politically getting it passed and in trying to implement it. Instead, you just say you're helping the homeless. And even if some people have a better, they're maybe more impassioned to be those was it activists like
Right.
us, to be a part of pushing that sort of thing politically, for social justice reasons, right? Because of the Black community or another minority community being, financially unstable and more likely to be homeless. That's great to get them on board. And I can even have their messaging go out and say, we're doing this for, name the minority group. But then when the other side comes in and says, nope, you're just being racist in the other direction, you're excluding white people, and you go, no, I'm going to take your argument away from you. I'm going to tell you, look, white people can qualify too. What is it? Affirmative action.
Yeah.
It doesn't mostly help Black people. It helps mostly white women.
If
So
the question is like branding, then my God, I mean, that's brand your issue as well. If they're using the red flag to scare people, then come out with red flags. I'm okay with I'm okay with that. But when it comes to like creating an order of operations or hiding some political aims whilst broadcasting another, we start to enter into sketchy territory. This is ultimately one unified struggle for our sort of for our class here. So yeah, I'm going to be fighting for indigenous rights, and I'm going to be fighting for raising the minimum wage for those freaking poor what is it called, white youths in West Virginia, and getting them retooled to proper jobs. And we close down all the coal mines because of our transitioning into green energy. Like, run with that. Like, up until now, like on green energy, for instance, like we've been like the left has been hammered by people saying, oh, well, you're going to close all the coal mines, you're going to get rid of all these, these jobs, and all these people in West Virginia are going to be out of business. Well, I'll say, well, hit back with saying, well, those people in West Virginia are going to be the first ones to be put on a federal jobs program to have new positions paying them equal, or if not greater than what they already have. Like,
open up solar power plants and windmills up in West Virginia.
But just you don't have to abdicate like the argument or start fighting it on the terms of the opposition. But you can rather go the extra mile with your own beliefs, I'd like to think. I mean, I think that there is a at the end, like, a branding issue for the Green New Deal, I think, is present. I mean, they like to talk about like, yeah, it's the Green New Deal, like, you know what you get.
Yeah.
But that does, you're not explaining this to conservatives that means a
exactly.
great investment in them, in their communities, in them being able to find a new job. I remember there was this nice news report where it showed this West Virginia coal miner. It's like, yeah, I'm learning how to I learned Java, I'm sitting here and I'm programming, and I'm like sitting here going, why aren't they running with this? This coal miner now is a freaking programmer. That's the Green New Deal.
To that end, I don't think every single coal miner is capable of learning how to code, or they might be too old to pick up a new skill. At some point, you'd have to provide them retirement benefits and say, hey buddy, hey, you've done your job, now enjoy the rest of your life.
Then fight to strengthen Social Security, and at the same time say, well, not everybody's going to be a programmer, but it means that we are committing to making sure that these people will have a job no matter what happens to this industry based on the national interest. Okay. Instead of just sort of assuming everybody knows what a Green New Deal entails.
To dovetail off of the Green New Deal, I don't know why. I know why they are like, they don't want to. I know why they are, because it does sound like the scary word socialism, but lead on public works projects like building mass fields of solar panels, building geothermal plants, building dams, like what the Roosevelt administration did back in the day with the Tennessee Valley Authority. And it might not have been perfect, and there was a lot of crap that was done and that was denied, but it was something, and we could lead off that. But you're going to have these asshole politicians will say, well, that's socialism and we can't have that, and that's another issue for another time. I feel
so just to circle back metaphorically on this point, to that I say, free education.
There you
Like,
go.
as soon as a person, comes to me and complains, oh, I'm going to lose my job at the coal factory or the coal mine, and be like, well, get yourself an art degree here
Yeah.
for free. This
There
is
you
what
go.
I'm advocating. We'll do both at the same time. Walk
Mhm.
and chew bubble gum. We're raising the floor. That's what I'm pretty much getting at.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
No, I agree. Yeah. I mean, like,
So
but whether or not this effort should take precedence over social justice in regards to either Black people or to Native Americans, I mean, I don't think that that's a good idea when it comes to building a coalition. I don't think that we have to hide it. I don't think that we have to pretend it's not there or to not run with it on the platform. We should fight all these particular battles. It doesn't cost us anything to say
exactly.
that we are for Black lives.
I think that's the disconnect. I definitely wouldn't suggest that we hide our beliefs in regards to social justice. But like, speaking in terms of social justice, there's like the priority of, say, making it so cops don't get away with murder in the law, and versus reparations.
Defund the police or something like that.
Well, no,
Yeah,
I
that
mean
might-
versus reparations. Like, I'm saying, there's the priority. Like, strictly speaking, to get justice on reparations, it's a good thing. I value it. We need to do that at some point. But a bigger priority to me is making it so that the police are trained to, and the law is enforced on them when they violate it.
But
So
I think, and I hate to be this guy, but and maybe the problem is when I don't want to say, as a white person, I've never been put in this position in my life in which I've had to make this argument, but I would say that it is a little ironic for us to be assuming what exactly these communities should be prioritizing or what is the solution to these issues. Like, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I have an opinion on reservations and land reparations and giving them all these sorts of things. I don't think that, who am I to be sitting here and dictating this to them? But at the same time, I appreciate that it's going to be a conversation. It's going to be have to be had mutually as equals, as members of this society of this republic. Now, as to whether or not we can sort of have this whole rebranding thing, I think what's really going to kill us is if we don't actually start caring about white working class issues, like these economic issues you put forward.
yes.
Neglecting them, I think, is the issue.
Yes.
Either to this point, I
Yeah.
don't think it is the proliferation of vital minority issues that is necessarily the problem. The Democrats are winning just because they forgot the working class exists.
Mhm.
They don't care about their issues. They need to
Um,
start caring about them again.
Yeah.
That's the key to victory.
Yes, it
It's
is.
not a sleight of hand in terms of which issues you listen to.
And,
Yeah.
It's having the conversation at all.
It's a good discussion we've had all around, and I know it kind of went in all kinds of directions, but that's how we are, folks. We're gonna start here, and because sometimes sometimes things are bigger than what they are. But I do want to say good discussion on that, on what's going up in Canada. Hopefully there will be a reckoning soon.
It's Canada anyway. What's the worst that could happen?
And I welcome people's comments below to tell us what you think, because
Mhm.
we are just spitballing here. Nobody
We are.
has like a proven solution that must work.
None of us. I don't speak as an authority on any of this. And if y'all out there, have an opinion contradicting, like, hey, share it out there.
Don't share it with me. I don't believe in alternative opinions, honestly.
just please be thoughtful is all I ask. Please be thoughtful. Moving on to the
Direct your hateful trolling comments to me, because man, I love watching trolls get it.
He's got a hateable beard. Look at that.
I think I can handle. I think the challenge is to just go through every possible troll and every possible insult and confirm to myself, okay, yeah, that one didn't make me cry. Neither did that one. So just unleash your hatred. I want it.
Okay, so moving along, Steve, you probably have a lot more info on this subject, but the recent drama between TYT, Jimmy Dore, Kyle Kulinski, and a whole bunch of other affiliated YouTube personalities, news sources. What's going on?
All right. So the main issue is with Syria. Many of you perhaps remember in 2017, I think it was, there was a chemical weapons story or a chemical bombing story that was said to have occurred in Syria. I believe it was MSNBC and a bunch of other news, obviously, that basically started going with this notion that Trump was being presidential for the first time in his first year because he bombed the crap out of one airbase in response to this chemical attack. Meanwhile, today there is some interesting stories out there you can find of chemical weapons being used by Israel on Palestinians, but we can cover that another day. The important thing is Assad was accused of using chemical weapons on his own land. And without even going into any details about the reasons why they think he did it or why they thought he did it, it was just assumed he did it, and that violates international law like the US never has done before, and gave us a reason to attack without going to the UN whatsoever. Now, afterwards, 2 years later, we get a story that if you look up OPCW, you'll find there's the story of how we have some whistleblowers pointing out that it was basically a false flag story that gave America an excuse basically to get involved in Syria militarily. And so we still have, basically, our troops are still being used for the war in Syria over shit that we have little to no idea of what's going on about it. And Cenk and Anna of TYT are still to this day of the impression that the initial story was correct. Assad bombed his own people and it should be put to shame. Meanwhile, Jimmy Dore from the very beginning covered all of the holes in the story. Like one reporter who went to confirm chemical attack found was given a backpack which was supposedly attacked, and she sniffed it. Now, if she had actually smelled a gas which pretty much melts your neurons, that would not have left her looking too good.
Not
if she actually smelled it,
yeah.
right?
And where does Aaron Matei fit in this? Because I know he's one of the main characters.
So Aaron Matei is a journalist who covered Syria with the PCW whistleblowers, and he has been doing good journalism on that, to that effect, and it's come out. Now you've got not only Jimmy Dore and company, but you've also got Kyle Kulinski and a few other YouTubers, never cable media, that are agreeing with Aaron Matei and supporting Aaron Matei, while meanwhile TYT's sticking with their, of course it was a chemical attack by Assad story, and they really don't go into any detail about it. Meanwhile, this other side goes into lots of details and covers the story. So TYT made an announcement of or made a comment to it where Cenk says, well, yeah, I guess Aaron Matei yelled at me. I'm like, okay, whatever. Aaron Matei called Cenk out for not covering it, whatever. But immediately after mentioning it, Anna Kasparian just goes off the fucking rails. It's like, oh, Aaron Matei, yeah, fuck him. Oh, I can't deal with this. I'm like, oh, okay. Is that
and I do have a little bit of context about that, actually.
Respectable journalism.
If I recall, Jimmy Dore jumps in on this to defend Aaron Matei, and for a little bit of extra context, like Jimmy Dore sank how do you pronounce it? Huh?
Cenk?
Thank you.
Cenk Uyghur.
Cenk.
Yeah,
spelled with a C, pronounced like a J.
Yeah, and Anna Kasparian and the rest of the good people at TYT, they used to be one cohesive whole
Yep.
years ago. And, they've since splintered. Jimmy has since splintered. And now this has kind of grown into a giant feud between all these parties. And I did watch this video from Kyle Kulinski, and he kind of, I have my views on Kyle Kulinski, but he did come of it to where it's like, hey, don't involve me in this petty bullshit, and kind of pointed out that now it's involved, accusations of being inappropriate jokes, and Jimmy Dore is now looking like a jerk because he's doubling down on a lot of crap, and I'm
But
looking
so
at it.
so I just feel like the audience who isn't familiar with the story should hear a little of the details you're inferring here.
Go ahead,
Um,
Steve.
so you have Kyle gave his response, and this was after Anna Kasparian had sent a direct message to Jimmy Dore reminding him of times which he was sexually harassing her in the workplace
Mhm.
and being inappropriate. And Jimmy Dore decided to take that DM, showed it to everybody through his show, and pointed out, and just was like, okay, here's my side of that story. She came in dressed inappropriately in Jimmy Dore's view. I'm not saying it's necessarily because I wasn't there.
Right.
But as he describes it, he could see her thong, and he made a comment about it, and then he felt bad about it. But that also he is doubling down on his position that there's a certain kind of limit to how much you can reveal of yourself in the workplace. Now, if you ask me, I say that's where Jimmy Dore is wrong. Like,
Yeah.
he is why we can't have nice things. I say let women be topless whenever they feel like it. I say let women reveal as much of themselves as they like. It's, God damn it, Jimmy, it's eye candy. Like, enjoy a good thing. But yeah, all right. So, and there, Jimmy Dore, then Kyle came in and he said, look, both of you are being petty, both of you are inappropriate and gross. And if you drag me into this further, I'm going to have nothing to do with either of you.
Yeah. And that's where Kyle has kind of come out of this, like he's severed basically from, or at the very least he's like, I don't want to have Jimmy on my show. He's got his own thing
Yeah.
with Crystal Ball going on, and he's, they're like, we don't want anybody on our show. And I think where this is going, and you can even, extend it out to say, oh, what's the name of that journalist from The Intercept that was booted off? He did he revealed La Machado. Somebody help me.
Like I completely print media.
Glenn Greenwald. Yes,
Glenn Greenwald.
Okay.
Glenn Greenwald. You can extend this to Glenn Greenwald as well. I know that for me, there's a lot of talk with former Bad Faith host and former Chapel Trap House host Virgil Texas, and accusations of grooming, basically. Like, I think that what's going on right now is that you have a lot of, from one end, this legitimately, in the case of Virgil Texas, there are allegations, but I just want to point out there that we don't have any. There, there hasn't been anybody else who's come out to make claims. We haven't seen screenshots, DMs. So as of now, I just want to say it's all alleged that Virgil has groomed or been inappropriate to somebody who claimed this all happened when she was 16. You've got that going on one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, you have this nastiness and pettiness between all these personalities. And in my mind, it's like, on the one hand, I do want to just step away and just, hey, unsubscribe.
Okay,
Unsubscribe.
I see where you're coming from. And
Mhm.
for me, when it comes to, if it were just drama and people shit talking each other, I'm
Mhm.
grabbing the popcorn. I mean,
Yeah.
you run away, I absorb it. I love to just watch everyone go ape shit, and it's fine. Like, at the end of the
Right.
day, especially if any of them starts to laugh at themselves for it, all the better.
Right.
What I will put down, and this is my nuance, which I inferred before the show, but I haven't actually stated it yet. I have a very strict standard about people who lie to me. I grew up with a very narcissistic father who would manipulate and lie to me all the time. And I learned very early in my life to just say, if you lie to me and I call you out on it and you double down, then fuck you. You're out of my life until, well, it's like, you're out of my life until you correct the matter, until you just as loudly as you made the lie, tell me you fucked up and you were wrong. And in some cases, it's like I can't establish that you're consciously lying, but it also doesn't matter because you're being negligent to a point where it just doesn't matter. The consequence is still there. Your responsibility in it is still there. So in light of that, here's where I see guilt. First of all, Kyle is the least bit guilty in all of this.
Yeah.
Still smidge guilty though by this standard, only because he is not calling out Cenk and Anna as liars. He instead says their reaction was silly. It was gross. But this is all information that they can go to. They are journalists. They have a responsibility to us to inform us of the truth. And if they're going to have a whole fucking feud over an issue, don't you think you should bring some journalism tools to the table and talk about the evidence which convinces you that it was an attack by Assad? So they're being completely disingenuous, and to the point where disingenuous to the point where I don't give a fuck if you actually are conscientiously lying. It's the same. You're negligent or you're a piece of shit liar, and I'm not gonna fucking deal with you until you correct the matter just as loudly as you lied in the first place. So Kyle's not doing that, and to that degree, I go, yeah, there's a flaw. There's a flaw, Kyle. You need to be willing to say Cenk and Anna are either lying or they're ridiculously negligent to the point where it doesn't matter.
Right.
That being said, he's already called them gross, so it's kind of like maybe I'm splitting hairs. Maybe I'm like he can go his own way with
his
that,
obligation, right? Really.
That too. That too. And I legitimately think by watching his video, which was about 20 minutes long, he's had it. He's like, look, I have to I at this point he said it's personal, there's policy and there's personal. And to his credit, he has done videos about the Syrian civil war, about all this going on with what did or didn't happen with gas attacks. So he feels that he's done his due diligence by reporting on Syria. And when it comes to what Anna, Cenk, and Jimmy are going on, it's like, look, this is I think it's like that's where he draws the line, because it's like he considers them friends. He used to consider them friends, basically. So I think it's going to take some time for him to kind of distance himself before he can definitively say, yeah, I have to come out on this side or that side, but he's not ready. And I don't blame him. I don't blame him at all.
There's a load of charity to grant to Kyle in regards to this, because he's clearly emotionally had it. And so, like I said, I might be splitting hairs as to how I want him to come out and just use the word liar or dishonest or something similar, some synonym towards Anna and Cenk because of this issue, because he's covered Syria. I think that part about him even bringing up like this complaint, like, of course I've covered it, was a deflection. I understand he might have interpreted that from Jimmy's passive aggressive liking of certain things or certain tweets, but at the same time, I don't think Jimmy would have come out and argued that he never covered Syria. It's that he's not speaking to this point about Syria with his friends who are lying now, and they have lied multiple times in the past. And I've got a record of lies that I've caught them in, and I've given them charity. Like, maybe they're just too stupid, right? And they just don't understand that it's misinformation, or that spin is a lie. If you're spinning a story, you are inherently lying. And I think they justify that to themselves, that because it's a part of the media industry for news, spin is always okay. It's like an exception for lying. No, you're fucking lying. That being said, I think I'll grant Kyle loads of charity in regards to this, because he has been right. He has been right about Syria. He's at least been critical towards them. So that's fair on the matter, and called it gross. And also there's another issue, which is one of the things that I hold on to personally, because it is a lie that TYT did in the past and Jimmy Dore continues to do. And that's on the actual views of Sam Harris. So there's a lot to go into that. I'll let people just kind of go into it on their own. But if you start finding shit talk about Sam Harris and his views, go to the source that they're taking his quotes from, because he has a history of being quote mined and misinterpreted and lied about. Raza Aslan has been on TYT, able to lie about Sam Harris's views, even immediately after the interview that Jank had with him long ago. And so to that, like, I kept watching TYT, but it was like, that was stupid. Why would you not call that lie out? Why would you still like let your show perpetuate that lie? And I was like, fuck Raza Aslan. But now I have to say, okay, yeah, fuck Jake too, on the issue of not just Sam Harris, but of this serious story, because he's been disingenuous this whole time. And Jimmy Dore, I can give him the charity that he's an idiot, and he admits that he's an idiot, and he clearly has never read a thing of what Sam Harris has said. But it doesn't stop the fact that he's constantly smear campaigning him whenever he brings him up. So
I think he needs to. My 2 cents here. I feel as if, one, he's a comedian, but 2, he's starting to like get serious. And at a certain point, you can no longer just sort of say, "Well, I'm a comedian. I'm just here to be funny. I have no obligation to give you the right facts." I'm like, well, you're entering into the talking about the world business, the politics business. You can't just keep on saying, I'm just here to make a joke and I can say whatever I want, right or wrong. People are coming to you now as a alternative media venue, even though you play, you call yourself a comedy show and that sort of thing. Understand that. Same thing that happened to the freaking Jon Stewart show. God, what was it called?
The Daily Show.
The Daily Show. Yeah. God darn it. People started, trusting him more than the real news.
Yeah.
And I think he understood that power and understood that he had an obligation to try to get it right at the least. Or if he couldn't get it right, stay strictly in comedy and not venture on into something serious.
And there he like, that's actually a quite quaint example, because he didn't when it came down to it accept full responsibility as that role, because he would just argue that he's supposed to be a dancing monkey, not a news source.
Right.
That being said, so the oh man, crap, I lost it. Go ahead with what anybody else is gonna say. I'm like,
I actually have a view that you first, Isaac.
No, I was just laughing. No, I
sorry. I had it and I lost it.
In my mind, actually, this ongoing feud between, and I want to point out, we've got Kyle Kulinski, Jimmy Dore, and TYT, a lot of LA-based. This is a Los Angeles feud.
That's the sad thing. They're all over here. And within walking distance of me, probably, or short drive.
And this also extends out towards in New York, the Majority Report with what's his face with Sam
Michael
Cedar
Brooks.
and his outfit. You've got Benjamin Dixon. You've got up in Canada the Rational National with David Dole. Everybody is kind of just taking this one side or another on this issue, but I want to point out, though, something very important. I think this is this is all some sort of relitigation, but where this all kind of began, that this open wound was Force the Vote way back in January, where Jimmy Dore openly stated that if the squad, which I want to point out, was an invention of the media, none of the representatives, AOC, Ilhan Omar, or Rashid Tlaib, they didn't call themselves that. That was something that the media foisted upon them. But he made this point. He said that if you are truly progressive, then take what vote that you might have to confirm Nancy Pelosi and hold it, use it as whatever leverage that you can in order to demand Medicare for all. Now, I support forced to vote purely on moral and ethical means. That even on the basis of it, why the fuck are you voting for quite possibly the second biggest political victim, not victim, but villain of my lifetime, next to George W. Bush, the next to the Bush administration? Nancy Pelosi has enabled a lot of the bullshit of the George W. Bush years, and she's still standing. So why would you conform her? But a lot of lines were drawn. A lot of TYT, Majority Report, and a lot of these people decided, no, you don't. They saw that Jimmy Dore, and to be fair, Jimmy Dore can just go really off the deep end and just get really angry. And I'm not a fan of his. I think he's a crank. To be perfectly honest, cranks have their purpose.
That's why I am a fan. Like I just love that maniacal.
Yes. Oh my! I was saying this to a couple of folks in the MPP who used to say, like, I think that Jimmy Dore is just a left-wing Rush Limbaugh. And I stood up and I'm like, yes. And we need a left-wing Rush.
Yes. Because there's an angry vote out there that needs to be heard.
Yeah.
Do you know what Rush Limbaugh managed to accomplish and all of his ilk by whipping up a whole generation? They sent this country back 50 years because of these sorts of media outlets. And I said, by God, if you want to win, it isn't sunshine, freaking lollipops and rainbows here. This is a part of a wider strategy to gain political power.
Yeah,
you need a Rush Limbaugh on your side. So rather have him with you than against you. My take.
So I remembered what I was going to say earlier. This is circling back to liars, right? What you have here in these circles is every one of these players has pointed out the overt, stupid narratives and lies of others on YouTube that are complete imbeciles, like Ben Spoiled Little Shit Piro, Mile Yiannopoulos, and
Miles Ian Chong. Miles Ian Ian Chong or whatever that motherfucker.
I don't know if he's real.
Kyle
I
still
just see him
clowns
on Twitter.
The fake personality that used to be on TYT.
Dave
Rubin. Yeah, right.
Oh, really smart.
They call out these motherfuckers and their lies constantly, right? How do you have room to call out their lies when there is still this big fucking plank in your own eye of not only your close friends who you don't want to tell them they're lying, or you yourself still to this day lying about Sam Harris's views, or you yourself with the evidence right there for you to look at are lying about Syria. Like, you have to, you have to deal with your own shit. Like, you have to you have to cover your ass before you go criticizing these losers for being just career liars. You yourselves are career liars until you correct the fucking matter.
My observation on this is that this is another consequence of the internet age and the social media age, is that when a feud starts, it's just that much easier for it to turn into this huge fire that consumes everything, and that other things can be added to make it bigger. Like, I've been watching a lot of, when I'm working at home, I've been watching a lot of 90s stuff, like old late night bits from not just the Daily Show, but also, from what's his face? David Letterman and Cisco and Ebert and all that kind of stuff. And there was this point within the 90s to the aughts where there was this feud between Conan O'Brien and Jay Leno. And before that, it was David Letterman and Jay Leno. And the bigger issue was NBC. NBC promised David Letterman and Jay Leno, hey, you're going to have the Tonight Show. They promised him the Tonight Show. They gave it to Jay. Then they gave it to Jimmy Fallon, who's just the worst. Let's be honest. He's fucking the worst, but neither here nor there. But back in those days, you didn't hear about that until years later. Or if these hosts on their own show kind of divulged, and they were careful about that because it's like, I don't want to get involved because I don't want to make this worse than what it is. But now in this internet age where TYT, Jimmy Dore, they're our generation's, David Letterman's and Letterman's and so forth. It's like we see it in an instant, basically, and it just the inherent evil of social media kind of taking something controversial and anger inspiring and just blowing it up for everybody to get that engagement.
Get those views.
Exactly. So
Yeah,
I
and-
mean, go ahead, Isaac. I mean,
Oh,
go
no,
ahead,
that was
Steve.
And I just want to put out there, yeah, I'm Team Coco all the way, but that's not to do with liars. That's just pure talent.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no. Since The Simpsons, he's just
Oh yeah.
There you go.
Now, I do want to also bring this up as well. Like, I've unsubscribed from a lot of these people. I've just started dropping them left and right, and I might only have like maybe two channels that I'll regularly watch. But as far as what's considered leftist news or progressive news, I've just stopped subscribing to them because it's like, be a professional, God damn it.
There's always Democracy Now.
Yeah. I'll say this about Democracy Now. That's a professional.
It's just
outfit.
they're boring.
They're boring.
They're like C-SPAN.
But they're boring, but God damn it, they're professional. Like, say what you will about the host. You might have your quibbles and opinions, but it's like they're here to report on the news, and they're not here to be personalities. I think that's the problem, is that it's this sort of news entertainment industrial complex where you tell the news and entertain. It's like, why not just give us the news and be professional? You might bore me, but God damn it, maybe I just want to be informed.
I might learn something. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I do want to say, and I think specifically this Syrian story, because I know I've caught Democracy Now being compromised before and be on the wrong side of a story. And I
Right.
think Syria originally, I don't know of an update from them after the OPCW event, but originally I believe they were actually, from my recollection, reporting chemical attack by Assad and not really reporting the questioning of it. I could be wrong there. So
Right.
double check me. But yeah, so it's like, I'm okay with the fact that, like, you're never going to find anybody who's absolutely perfect. And
Yeah, of course.
but I do have a standard, and I think it's perfectly fine, Ruben. Everybody's got it. I think it's a good thing. You got a line that once people cross it, you're out.
Yep.
Same even with Kyle. Like, I commend that. I still think he's the best actor in all of this, even though I have still a criticism for him. But at the same time, you have sorry. At the same time, for me, my line with lying, like, I try to give them as much charity and as much slack as I can until they're just too tangled up in it to really get away from it. And that's been TYT.
And not just lying, but continuing the American
double down.
imperial line, doubling down on American homogeny, and that's something that I'm particularly critical towards TYT. But I really do think to where it's like, we're all living in glass houses, and that's what has precipitated with the outrage industry, the social media, and all this kind of stuff. It's like we all live in glass houses. I mean, and there's a lot of stone throwing going around, and it's like, Democracy Now looks really good because there's not throwing stones. And I wish I could find this personality to where it's like, I'm not throwing stones. I'm not a douchebag. I'm just here to give you the news. And even if I'm going to entertain, maybe I'll entertain, hey, I'll entertain, but I'm going to read the news, because I'll tell you this much. I miss the days of Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert, but then I don't know if y'all have watched The Late Show, but Stephen Colbert is cringe now.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm perfectly happy with throwing stones, but to your point, I hope people throw stones back. If you break one of my glass windows, if you break my glass house, I'm going to tell you, thank you, because Now I can fix it up and make it sterner, do something better with it. Like
That's true.
You're
I
a better
really,
man than me.
yeah, I really want to champion just the idea of showing yourself coming out of your own cognitive dissonance. Like people don't know how to do that, especially that is another trait of American culture. We shove our heads in the sand when we know somebody is right when they're correcting us, rather than going, shit, I was wrong.
That's not an
Thanks.
American trait.
No,
Like,
it's not.
That is the most human thing I can imagine. I mean, like even like people perceiving that might be what you're doing will elicit a negative reaction. I think that is just the case in which why people sort of get angry when you mention like, oh, I'm this, I'm a vegan, I don't smoke, that sort
I
of
still
thing.
say bring it. Like bring
Yeah.
all of your hatred to me when I admit that I'm wrong, so that I can prove to the world that it's okay on the other side. Like you have to get to that side where when you fucked up, you covered your ass and you dealt with your own shit.
That,
right?
sir, is the sin of pride. You have a certain pride in knowing the right way of doing things. My God, but you're not Christian, so it doesn't matter really. I mean,
I'm a big
Covered your
Twitter.
shit.
I'm a big
there you
Twitter
go.
head. I'm a big Twitter head, and somebody, an activist, pointed this out that while all this, what I consider, and not to say that there isn't legitimate
Lord.
against TYT and all these other people, what they put out there and what they continue, but at this point, it kind of comes off the squabbling where it's like, hey, there are people on the ground trying to do and achieve stuff. Like, motherfucker, there's still BLM protests going on. There are still mutual aid programs going on, and I think it's a matter of time and a place, basically. Like, maybe I'm going to say this to the viewer, hey, you're going to make your decision where you stand in all this and what personality you view. And I don't know you out there, the viewer, the listener, so I can't judge, and I'm not going to judge one way or the other on, because we're all different. We all got our proclivities and crap like that. But that being said, I think it does. I think we do need to take a step back. And all these, we have to ask ourselves, who am I willing to give credence towards about reporting on the news? And is this guy who is it more important to be entertained, or is it more important to be informed? And right now, I think we're going to have some kind of reckoning on maybe we ought to go back to the day where comedy and where we grow out of the comedian newsman. Basically, we're going to have to grow out of that, I feel.
So a small pushback on that. Something beautiful about comedy and about where comedians actually serve a great social purpose is, for comedy, for something to be funny, there has to be an inherent truth that's being exposed, right? Something that was unexpected or just never really thought about much, just taken for granted. And I do find like that was maybe what was the worst thing about Jon Stewart's excuse for like, I'm just the dancing monkey, because you clearly can do so much good with just being a comedian.
Steve, you just gave me a really great transition, actually.
All right.
You just gave me a really great transition, because on the subject of how humor can be righteous and can shed light, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about Bill Cosby, everyone. Because I find
Dios mío, no, please don't do this.
Those times when life itself is a joke.
Because I find it completely remarkable that back in 2014, Hannibal Buress, on a set in Philadelphia, talked trash about Bill Cosby, and said to the crowd, yeah, don't forget that you raped people, Bill Cosby. And then out of the woodwork, people started to stand up and said, yes, Bill Cosby actually did this to me. It's almost as if, this guy, was playing with matches, and all of a sudden, boom,
the joke became a reality.
Yeah.
Oh.
But I really do think that in that sense, though, I don't think that Hannibal Buress, and I've been also watching it, actually, clips of interviews with him, he didn't intend it to become bigger than what it was. But, that's how comedy is. Sometimes you're just playing with matches and all of a sudden it explodes into something bigger than what it's meant to be. And for Barres's credit, it did become something that was unequivocally good at the time. The birth of the Me Too movement that sadly compromised today. And I can't think of any other bigger compromise than, well, Joe Biden in the office, first and foremost. And of course, Bill Cosby has been released as of earlier this week.
Now, we're for the women, but this man is our nominee. He is
So-
of suspicion.
I just want to point out, because I don't think people realize this enough. Cosby got himself an OJ deal.
He
Like
did.
that's what this is.
Well, what
like
is this? If you don't mind clarifying.
Basically, like the court has now decided that the evidence just wasn't sufficient, and he is now considered not guilty. So there's no way to go back into it because it would be violating
Okay.
his
It would be
his-
double
his-
jeopardy. In that
Yeah.
case,
I'm reading this off of Business Insider, but this was back in 2005. That the Montgomery County District Attorney vowed not to criminally prosecute Cosby so long as the comedian testified in a civil case related to the same allegations. So, yeah, the prosecutor said, Bill, if you cop to all these crimes in a civil court, we won't take you to criminal court. Bill was like, well, fuck it. Yes, I did X, Y, and Z. And a couple years ago, he was prosecuted, he was put up on trial, found guilty and sentenced. And now his team of lawyers were like, hold up a minute, motherfucker, we had this deal.
Right.
And just like the OJ case, I can't think as it's one thing it's one thing for the monster to it's one thing for you not to catch the monster. It's another thing for you to be so bad at trying to catch him.
Yeah. Well, so I just want to point out, like, in light of the fact that it's an OJ deal that he's got himself, we still got OJ, right? We've got this. This is the American way, where sometimes you're not going to catch the monster. Sometimes they because we do value certain freedoms to an extreme that would risk it. Yeah, there are going to be some people who get off scot-free. Now, if they're serial in their crime, then we'll get them eventually. You can be reassured of that point. I think it's because OJ's not a serial killer that we haven't found him, guilty of murdering anyone else.
That's
true.
We got the motherfucker on robbing sports memorabilia.
Yes.
Okay, so he's still a sociopath. We can get him on other things, right?
Jesus.
But to that end, though, I mean, I would have hoped we would have gotten Bill Cosby in the first time so that we wouldn't have to wait till he does it again.
The first time was like what, the 60s?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a different time. We just didn't have the ability, the forensics.
Back then was a different world.
We have the forensics now, but we just don't use them.
Yeah.
And then well, so something else to point out, like, we also have Biden. Okay. And I don't mean the sex assault charges. Those are very real and worth consideration, but more to the point, he is a career warmongering, murderous piece of shit. He is in the business of blood money racketeering, and he's the president. So we got that to suck on amidst worrying about Bill Cosby getting out. At least Bill Cosby spent some time in jail, as did OJ, and there was something for them to regret about it. It won't be perfect, but I doubt you're going to find that old geezer still raping young women.
Knock on wood.
Yeah. So at least we've got that.
We can hope.
But what we are going to have Joe Biden continuing to kill people.
Well, that is true. One of them does have
Insatiably.
access to the nuclear stockpile. But anyway,
on that note, I would hope that we nail R. Kelly and Chris Brown to the wall sooner rather than R. Kelly, especially. That
allegedly.
Yes, I know, allegedly, but let's be real here. He needs to be nailed to the motherfucking wall.
For entirely unrelated reasons to the case in question.
I'm just putting out my own, I guess you could consider this cynicism by default, but I don't think Epstein is the last Epstein. No. I'm sure that the upper echelon has already planted another Epstein fall guy to do their bidding, and has put some things in place so that he'll never this new Epstein taking his place will never be able to reveal their dirty secret. So
He's out there somewhere.
I'm sure that the shit still keeps going, and I'm
Mhm.
sure because we don't hear about it. I'm
Yeah.
sure because Epstein's the only one prosecuted, and then I think he was murdered, but he's
Suicided.
dead. So it's just not over, folks. There's still
I know.
some shit going down and going on, and there's an inherent problem, I think, with our culture and young women, and establishing an age of consent, and because we have a higher standard than European countries, right? But or a higher age you got to reach, right? But at the same time, oh god, is there so many issues in our culture where we just need to talk this stuff out, like what is okay in terms of what you do sexually, and what is okay in terms of what you desire but don't act upon, and really get this shit cleared out, so that it's not always just shit throwing and being like, oh, you're horrible because you like X. No, you're horrible because you did X, and X is a horrible thing to do, ethically speaking. There's someone was hurt, or someone's rights were violated in
Right.
there.
See a therapist, everyone. Please, for the love of God, see a therapist.
Just get think critically about this, like about these issues. I just see so many people, they're like, oh, it's about sex, now we're gonna flare up and trigger all over the fucking place because the topic is sex related, and you're gonna get nothing accomplished because you just overreact whenever sex is on the table as part of the
Isaac,
issue.
do you have thoughts, Isaac?
Um, no, Mr. Cosby. Yeah, I got nothing on that. Nothing.
All right.
Like, I'm glad I don't either, because my God,
I know.
last thing, I hate the perpetual trials of the century. You know what I'm talking about?
This is supposed to be the trial of the century until it isn't, or
Yeah, until it is. But then George Floyd came along, and then there was another trial of the century. It's like, okay,
That was the trial of the century. Yeah,
it's like,
definitely.
great,
do you guys think we have enough time to discuss the Chauvin sentencing, or
I'm okay with it.
I think we're pressing up against our upper limit there, but
okay.
All right.
Well, so much for. Well, in that case, I do legitimately want to end our show on two pieces of good news. So, with that, everybody, let's end our show on two pieces of good news. First, and I do have this queued up right here. This is from Reuters. Earlier last month, June 22nd, Cuba had announced that they have finalized their Abdal goddamn Spanish is hard. Abdalva vaccine, which is 92.28% effective against the coronavirus. That this is a 3-dose shot, and that they're that they've that they have every intention on distributing it to the population in Cuba, and hopefully, with especially what's going on in countries like India and other countries that were hit really bad by the pandemic, hopefully they will be able to share and distribute doses to the harder hit areas out there. So let's hear it for Cuba, y'all. Doing some good in the world.
here's the
All right.
problem. You might call this prejudice. You might call this whatever you will, but I really do not like the Cubans. Like they just keep on trying to be nice to the world and to people. It's like, oh, you've got this a South African invasion. Okay, I guess we're gonna help you. Oh, you guys don't have any doctors. We'll send you some doctors. Like, seriously, can we just have some self-interested countries like hogging the limelight for once?
Well, I mean, what's not to say that they're trying to develop their own
Yeah.
soft influence.
Countries, yes.
Well, of course. There we go. Now we can make this a little bit more Machiavellian.
Yeah.
Well, I
There
mean,
we go.
if any country is going to do that, I mean, Cuba's one of the top to be like, hey, let's talk about that embargo. We got a vaccine.
We've got
We
a
still got that embargo.
Wouldn't that have been great? Goes up to Trump and say, "Look, I've got something for you." You lift that embargo. Oh my God.
Or work with something
Few
out.
months
I
late.
mean,
Say hello to my little embargo.
well, you know, the UN recently had a vote to outcry the embargo. Only two countries voted against. It's us and Israel.
Yeah, the dream team. It's always us in Israel. It's like, all right, proposed before the UN, the Beating Women Act. All in favor? It's the US and Israel. Okay. Like, Jesus Christ. It's like behind every bad vote, it's always the US and Israel.
Oh yeah.
And some Pacific Islander country that we pay the entire budget of. It's like,
well,
Yeah.
let's hope that this vaccine goes out, that not only the good people of Cuba can finally vaccinate themselves, but also hopefully they'll be able to distribute it to the world, because God knows the horrors that are going on in countries, especially India right now. It's a horror show over there, and
yeah,
it's a bright spot, y'all. Let's hold on to it. And finally, I want to end this on my little pet project, which is sports and solidarity. So I am, as y'all can tell, I'm a huge football fan. I am a Seahawks fan, and I do pay attention to sports. And lots of stuff has been going on between the intersection of sports and solidarity, from athletes being banned from the Olympics because they've tested positive for cannabis, to why is it that we're having the Olympics in Tokyo in the middle of a pandemic, to earlier in June the NFL announced, hey, we've stopped using race science in order to pay out settlements for CTE. It did happen, folks, earlier this month, reported by the AP. But I do have a legitimate piece of good news. So the NCAA, if I had to pick I can't think of a more evil sports organization second to FIFA, and even then, but in a Supreme Court ruling on June 21st, 9-0, the Supreme Court ruled that exploited college athletes cannot be denied certain that the NCAA can no longer bar colleges from providing athletes with education-related benefits such as free laptops or paid postgraduate internships. Now, I can't think of a closer comparison to what the NCAA does to student athletes than a sharecropping or a plantation system.
Oh God, no.
I know that the good people of South Park have made that apparent, but essentially the NCAA has used and exploited the idea of these students being amateurs in order to say, well, we're giving them scholarships, we're giving them room and board, and we're giving them all this, but at the same time we're exploiting their labor. We're profiting off their performance on the field, and if they make so much as $1 based off their likeness or in any other pursuit, or even something pertaining to education, we're going to make their life a living hell and kick them out, basically.
You see, it's a moral issue now, especially if they make money.
Yeah.
Can't have that.
No. Well, at the very least, now this ruling was issued strictly on educational benefits. However, the last person I'd expect to have such a strong opinion on this amongst the justices, Brett I Like Beer Kavanaugh,
Right.
provided the concurring opinion. And I'm reading from a sports blog, Deflector, but this case only a narrow subset of the NCAA's compensation rules. I had the concurring opinion to underscore that the NCAA's remaining compensation rules and raise serious questions under the antitrust laws. the NCAA's business model would be flatly illegal in most any other industry in America. All of the restaurants in a region cannot come together to cut cooks' wages on the theory that
Oh,
customers prefer to eat food from low-paid cooks. Law firms cannot conspire to cabin lawyers' salaries in the name of providing legal services out of a love of the law.
wait
Now,
a minute. They struck it down, citing an antitrust law.
it appears that's the angle that they're going off of.
That's
And
very interesting.
now, I'm not going to hand it to Brett Kavanaugh. As far as I'm concerned, he's a prick. He's a
It-
a legitimately
so
unpleasant person. Go ahead.
if I may, I was gonna say, yeah, Brett Kavanaugh, don't get me wrong, he's a horrible son of a bitch, piece of shit. He should not be a Supreme Court justice. But I want to point out, this is Trump's Supreme Court, right?
Yes, this is
all
Trump's
of the all of the shit talk about you can't let him pick the Supreme Court. Like, okay, look, every one of the court justices that Trump put in place, I guarantee he asked them behind the scenes, will you swear loyalty to me, as he does so with so many people? And they all said yes. But they were bullshitting the fuck out
Once
of him,
you get
like
in,
everybody
you
else.
can't get out.
Yeah,
it's a lifetime
you
appointment.
got no need. Like, is Trump like head of an assassin guild that's going to take you down?
He
No.
thinks he's a mafia don, and he's
Yeah.
a very bad one at that.
Well, he's
But
worked with mafiosos, so
he
why
has.
Don't get me
Now-
wrong. These are horrible people, and
Mhm.
I wish a better president had been around to pick not so horrible people.
Or how
But at
about
the same
this?
time, when your options are piece of shit versus piece of shit, I still don't care. And I still go to the polls. I still went even in this last election, and I wrote in abstain
There
to
you
show
go.
that I'm ready and willing to vote for somebody who's not a piece of shit when you bring them forward. That's just me.
And this does go into a discussion of repealing lifetime appointments too. We're gonna have to give them term limits. But
I'm down.
anyway, so like I said, Brett, I'm gonna keep calling him that. Brett, I like beer Kavanaugh gave this opinion, but he essentially signaled to the NCAA and to the players that, hey, the door's open, that eventually the student athletes are going to bring up another case and challenge the NCAA purely on business, on antitrust, and on compensation. So to that end, the NCAA has ruled that they're loosening their name, image, and likeness rules. So this happened on, again, from the deflector, June 28th. The NCAA said that they were proposing to suspend their rules related to name, image, and likeness. And what this means is that the NCAA profits immensely from the names of the athletes, the images, their images, and their likenesses in selling memorabilia, jerseys,
video games,
showing B film on games and stuff like that. There's a lot of money that's made off this, but the player doesn't see, the student athlete, the amateur athlete doesn't see a dime from that. Now, say what you will about the NFL, and the NFL is, I'm going to be the first to say that yes, they are a terrible sports organization, but at the same time, I've got like 5 or 6 Seahawks jerseys in my closet, and every one that I bought, a portion of that has gone to the individual players, and that's something that their union, the NFL Players Association, has negotiated. The NCAA, the student athletes, do not have a union. They do not have a labor organization on their behalf, but it's coming. And the fact that the NCAA is loosening or suspending these rules and essentially letting these students advertise or promote based on whatever they might have. The next step, I think, is unionizing, as far as I'm concerned, and taking.
God bless them too.
Yes. Now, what does this mean for the sport as a whole? I will say this. I think that what's going to happen is that the NCAA is going to have to throw their arms in the air and going to be like, okay, it's every school for themselves. you have to pay for the highest level of talent. And what's going to happen is that your USC's, your Bama's, your LSU's, they're going to offer top dollar for the best out of high school talents, while your smaller schools like Northwestern are just going to be left high and dry, basically. To that end, I would say not every school needs a top tier sports program. I went to Cal Poly. We have a sports program, but we weren't competing for national championships. So let's be real here. And at the end, so long as these student athletes get compensated, I'm happy. I'm happy.
Yeah, and don't even get me started on how the inherent education system, especially the university, does not help people get jobs.
Oh,
They
yeah.
aren't in
Nope.
the business of actually helping people have a fallback,
Mhm.
and so this is just one addition to the corruption of universities not doing what they were meant to do.
Yeah.
That has been resolved. So, like,
I'm an English major from Cal Poly Pomona, and I've gotten fuck all from that degree. So
oh,
I
but you
know
were
exactly.
enriched, right? You were enriched by being told you're too slow to get an A on most of your classes, and
Hey, you try interpreting a work of fiction, okay?
oh no, I'm right there with you. Like I wasn't able to get top tier competitive levels with my classes too, but it was like, do you want a person who's really good at being a parrot, or do you want somebody who's really understanding and absorbing the material?
And
And
that's
to that, I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, self-paced mastery learning, that is historically what has been shown in science to work best. And none of these fucking universities are updating to it.
and I wish that I was enriched. I will say that, but I just wish I wasn't up to my eyeballs in student debt for it.
Yeah, yeah, you're given a huge ass debt. You're enriched by a few tidbits of good information you learn along the way, all
Mhm.
while you're stressed to the point of suicide. Like, in mass, there's a lot of people that are stressed
Oh
to
yeah.
that point,
I
depending on the class
honestly,
and depending on the school.
I honestly want a classical education in the ancient sort of in the antiquity sense. You know what I mean? I want to follow around some old guy who just rambles on about whatever at the given moment, and I just have to accept those stories as a lesson. That that would be beautiful. Please send. I want to follow frickin' Socrates around and listen to what he's got to say. Like that's better than our education system right now.
Well, wait
If
a minute.
only I could have debated Socrates.
Wasn't that Jesus and his disciples?
I mean, hey, at least he didn't have to pay for the lesson. Huh? You know what I
That's
mean?
true.
It's like,
That's
I,
true.
I genuinely, like, just said it a side point. I wish I could have been there in the scene of the Phaedo to debate Socrates on why he shouldn't let himself die. Like, that would have been beautiful.
I
Well-
remember there. I hate to what is it called? I remember there was this one group of philosophers who thought that it was a good who thought it was fair enough that they should offer their patronage, to everybody, and they should go and teach all the sons of all the nobles, everything, philosophy, whatever, because they need the money to survive. And there was another group who stressed that you shouldn't do this. It should be
Mhm.
available to everybody.
Yep.
Mhm.
And that, for God's sakes, that I most certainly I stand behind. That is some principle right there. I'm not teaching Alexander the Great, freaking, morality, because he's just going to go and kill everybody. That's great.
Yeah.
I'd rather like to learn and know more about the world, and I'll
Yeah.
do it for free. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
On
and-
that,
okay.
go ahead, Steve. You'll
I
have
was
the
just gonna
last
say,
word.
and make no mistake, the current United States university system is an industry of sophistry.
Ah,
I think that's what you were just talking
oh yeah, the
about, right?
sophists. That's what they were
sophists.
called.
Yeah.
Okay, so on that note, we have run a little long, but hey, you the viewer get all this great content. So yeah, I think we're gonna go ahead and end it there. Thanks so much everyone for being here. Yeah, and hopefully for next time, hopefully we'll get David back on. I miss him.
Yeah.
We miss you, David.
I
Um,
spoke to
come
him 2
back
days
to
ago,
us.
but I miss him already.
okay, well everybody, have a great weekend. Stay safe out there. Please, for the love of God, do not set off fireworks. And we'll leave it there. Goodbye, everybody.